Hey, welcome back to Next Third, Best Third. I'm David Fenwick, founder and your host, and we're so excited to have you here. Next Third, Best Third is all about men living with intentionality, right? To make their next third of their life not just the best for them, but the best for other people as well. And I'm so excited to have my good friend Seth Dahl coming in. Seth, it's so good to have you here.
It's so good to be here.
It's so great.
I've been looking out with you.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this for a long time.
Come on. Same here.
You know, as you know, Next Third, Best Third there's 5 pillars, right? And it's cognitive, physical, emotional, relational, and then what I call spiritual, which are those issues that a man sometimes buries down, things that they carry with them, war against their identity.
Yeah.
Things like shame and brokenness, things like that. But you do so much work in really all 5 of those areas, and not just doing work, research and everything, but you're actually living it. How old are you now?
46.
46, and you look fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you're doing it. You're living it. Your next third's going to be your best third.
It is. It's definitely going to be.
Yeah. So what's kind of on your heart out of those 5?
I mean, right now, probably for me, the thing I'm most focused on is the emotional space. I've just been learning about it more and more over the last couple of years and practicing a lot of stuff, just processing emotions. Like I was thinking when we were talking earlier, like, oh, I have this really great example that I use in some of my classes and stuff, but that there's a difference between expressing emotion and processing emotion. And kind of the example I love to give is like if you were a loaded gun, right? And you can't take the magazine out, but it's loaded with bullets, and the bullets are the emotions, our emotions. There's only 2 ways. If you can't take the magazine out, there's only 2 ways to remove the emotions, to remove the bullets. One, I can pull the trigger, or I can rack the slide. And so the way I describe it is expressing emotion is like pulling the trigger. I have a loaded gun. I have all these emotions going on, all this stuff happening inside me, whether it's from my life situation or my kids or just things that are happening in the world. Like, wow, I'm loaded with emotion. But if I pull that trigger, especially in my home, that's the way I describe it, is in the home, it's like if I pull this trigger, everyone immediately goes deaf, right? Like a gunshot in the house, nobody can hear a thing. Everyone's ears are ringing. I maybe blew a hole in the wall or blew out a window. So now whatever atmosphere I wanted in my home, now whatever's out there can come in, and whatever I've created in here can go out. And so I can lose what I've created, or I can invite stuff I don't want because I blew out the windows, blew holes in the wall. My atmosphere is now no longer what I want it to be. Or I blew a hole in somebody, metaphorically speaking, right? Like symbolically speaking, like, oh, I blew a hole in somebody. And now I have hurt people, deaf people, and I can't, I'm no longer cultivating what I wanted in my home. Plus, I've got people that are really, really scared because I've expressed my emotion. But processing, if I am filled with emotion from my situation, stuff's happening, if I can learn to process that and eject those bullets, no one's deaf. So that means when I talk, my kids are going to hear me. My wife is going to hear me. We're listening to each other. We're hearing each other because we're not deaf and we're not scared. And the atmosphere I've cultivated gets to stay in here. Nobody's hurt, nobody's injured, and everyone actually feels safe. Like, ooh, Dad is actually really good at making sure these emotions are coming out in a healthy way, processed instead of expressed. And so that's the world I've been working in, mostly with families, parents, because there's this verse in the Bible, we probably all know it, that hit me different after I started studying emotions. It's Ephesians 3:20 that says, "Now to him who's able to do exceedingly abundantly above all we could ask or think or imagine." And that's the part most of us know or talk about.
Right.
But there's the rest of the verse. According to the power that works in us. And that word works is, in the Greek language, is energio. So it's where we get our word energy from, which emotions are energy in motion. So the more I do this stuff, the more I'm like, oh, emotions are involved in every single thing that we do. They give me all of my motion. Whether I'm angry about my life situation, well, that will give me motion, energy to put me in motion. Or if I'm afraid, it will give me energy to put me in motion and run or hide or lock me up and freeze me. So emotions are so involved. But in that verse, it's like God's able to do exceedingly abundantly above all we could ask or think or imagine, according to the power that's energized in us. And I have this feeling that like our emotional intelligence and well-being is directly connected to what we allow God to do in our lives. Like he's able to do exceedingly abundantly, but I think all of us have like, I mean, we're here next third, best third. We want the next third to blow our minds, to be exceedingly abundantly above all we could ask or think. We want that. And we've probably all had areas that are like, yeah, God has blown my mind. This situation blew my mind in a good way. Like, wow. And then we probably have other areas that we're like, I'm waiting for that. I need that. I think they're directly connected to our emotional space. What energy is going on and what power is energized inside of us, causing us to act or not act. And so, not trying to ramble or anything,
No,
but
I love this.
This is the stuff I'm really into right now,
Yeah.
is how do we get better and better at processing emotions? You know, there's all this research coming out that's, I mean, it's not even new, but it's like a lot of these diseases that we're dealing with are stress related.
Yeah.
Like over 50% of the ER visits are stress related.
That's right.
Like people are overloaded emotionally, and it's their bodies are carrying it around because it's a nervous system thing. Their bodies are holding it all, and it's playing out in all these problems physically. So it's like this stuff affects the physical just as much as it does the
I
internal.
think that's the thing that has really caught me kind of by surprise, is how everything's so intertwined, right? Your physical health, your mental, your cognitive health with your emotions.
Yeah.
And of course, relationships and the lies we believe about ourselves and things like that.
Yeah.
But when going back to emotion with men in particular, because I talk to men all the time, and we haven't done a really good job of educating men about emotion, right?
Yeah.
I mean, emotion's normal. I love that you said it's energy, emotion.
Yeah.
We all have energy,
It's
emotion.
connected to every emotion
It's connected
we have
to
in our
everything.
life.
Like that example, if you're afraid, you're going to run. It stimulates you to do that, right? But it's like we tend to. I know it's so common in so many guys, is that we try to suppress emotion, so we don't process them.
Yeah.
And then if you suppress it long enough,
You express it.
you're going to express it.
Yeah.
You know, and when you were given that picture of a gun going off, I was thinking, okay, the sound, they can't hear you. But the other thing was, and you touched on it, was the fear. All of a sudden now you've got your family, the people around you are afraid of you,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and then they don't want to interact with you. And now you've got this guilt and shame that comes in. Now it just goes on
It
and
just
on.
snowballs. Yeah. Yeah. That's it. And so that's a thing that I'm really helping people with, and really been growing in my own life and helping men.
Yeah.
Like I love helping men. I've got to watch all these men. I go to this retreat in Idaho a couple times a year, and it's all these cowboys that are like famous for stuffing their emotions and shoving them down and just keep going. And these guys, the way we kind of phrase it is like they come out swinging, like they come out and like, here's all my stuff. And then we show them what to do with it and how to actually get it processed so it's not stored inside of us and affecting everything that we do. It's like, oh, now we're free to do something new, to do something different, because this emotional energy isn't driving us the same way that it was.
We can't help but talk about masculinity, you know, within this platform and everything. And the idea of masculinity being that, you said the cowboy, you know, that cowboy that, you know, quiet, holds everything in, tough guy. And you realize that is such it's really not being masculine at all.
No.
You know, it's just a role. And we all play these roles, you know. I see that. I know for myself, I grew up, I had a a dad who he's a good guy. I mean, my father was a great guy. He worked hard and everything, but he never taught me anything about being a man.
Yeah.
I mean, we just didn't have any kind of conversations like that. And so over the years, I've had to glean it from other guys. I've had to learn it on my own. I've had to go through the trial and error and everything.
Yeah.
And for me, emotion is, I can be real emotional, but it's not always processing.
Yeah.
A lot of it's just spewing it,
Yeah. And that's a huge thing. I kind of grew up the same way. Like my parents were divorced, so I never lived with my dad. And so I'm the same. I'm like, oh, I go hang out with these cowboy guys and like, I need to learn some of this stuff from you guys too. Like I'll teach you what I know, but I need to pull from you because you guys have this other side that is, like horses and animals and nature and all that stuff that those guys are so connected to. It's like, we help each other grow, but I've had to be the same. Like, I need to, YouTube and other men have helped me in this world quite a lot.
Yeah. People who know me well, they kind of the joke is like, I have no guy skills, like if I got to build something or fix something, it's like, I don't do that, but my dad owned a business in a small town. And the way he raised us is he's like going, hey, cause we had a family shoe store. So he'd say, the plumber in town buys shoes from me. So we use the plumber. The mechanic in town buys shoes from me, so we use the mechanic, right? The painter, right? Goes on and on and on. So my dad didn't do anything. He hired it out because these guys were supporting our family in our family business. So that's just how I grew up. I grew up, if, you needed your car fixed, you bring it to the mechanic, that kind of thing. So all of a sudden, I'm 30 years old one day, and I'm realizing I don't know how to do anything, So,
that's it.
But that's okay.
It is.
So you're doing this, really working a lot with families, right? I've followed some of your social media and seen some of the stuff you're doing. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I love it. That's what I realized. Like, I've helped parents for years with like practical tools, but I've realized like whatever the energy is, the emotional energy that I'm using the tool with, will decide what the results are. I can use this same tool in discipline with my children and get them to shut down, avoid me, put up walls towards me. And it's not because of the tool. It's because of how I used it, because of the energy in it, the tone in my voice, not just the voice and the words that I said, but the energy in the words, the tone in which it came out directly affects. And I'm like, I want to help families, not just with the practical stuff, but the energy within it to then create the relationships that they want with their kids and their spouse and all that stuff. So we're smack in the middle of a 6-month course. We meet every week and we go for 6 months. And part of what I've seen with the emotional space is like, a huge part of it is completing our past emotions, right? So like all of us grew up and we're sitting here as adults going, I have a lot of emotional stuff from how I was raised or how I wasn't raised, and I'm carrying that. And part of it is completing those past emotions, like knowing what to do with those, fully processing those out. So I'm not carrying around a bunch of stuff in my current family, in my present. And then processing the present. What do I do on a day-to-day basis to actually get this stuff out? So I'm not going to bed with it. I'm not waking up with it. It's not piling up anymore. Kind of how I would describe it is like completing the past is like breaking the dam. Let's break the dam. Let's get this out. And then let's restructure this dam so it's flowing continually. And then the third part is shaping our future emotions, which is all around identity. Like emotions, this is too much to explain here in a podcast, but like every emotion generates inside of our nervous system directly connected to what we believe about ourselves. And that's it. If it's not something I believe about myself or I've connected to my sense of identity, I don't care. Like, I don't care who wins this football game that's happening this weekend, because I haven't said, I'm a UT guy, Or I'm a Georgia guy. Whoever's playing, it's Georgia. Right. All these Georgians were flying in here today. Yeah. Like, neither one of those are connected to my sense of identity, so I actually won't generate emotions around that. Or, you tell me the Cincinnati Reds lose, I'll generate more emotions around that than I will if the Cubs lose, because my son is so connected to the Cincinnati Reds, and he's connected to me as a son and a dad, and I'm like, oh, this matters to me. It's connected to who I am as a father and a dad. And so if that team loses, it generates emotions differently than a team I don't care about, or I've got connected to my sense of self. So all of that is like, how do we shape our beliefs about who we are so we generate different emotions that we've chosen, and we're not just victims of whatever is happening all the time, but we actually can shape our future emotions because we've processed our present ones, we process them on a regular basis, and we've completed all this past stuff that's dragged us down for so long.
It's so good, and I can tell you with all the conversations I've had is trying to, if you really want to make your next third your best third, right? You have to be honest. That honest appraisal.
Yes.
And so you have to come face to face with some demons. You have to say blow the dam up. But the thing about those emotions is it's like if you're not dealing with your emotions and you've got all this stuff, and then all of a sudden you get married. Well, now you've got another person with all their emotions, and then kids follow, and you're building a career, and this stuff gets stuffed down. It's put aside, it's hidden in the attic, you put it out in the garage, something like that. And so then one day you find yourself where where you are 46 years old, and your kids are now growing up, and and then me, empty nest and all this kind of stuff. You find yourself and you're like going, oh, I don't want to deal with that now. Yeah. But if you're going to make the next third your best third, if you're really going to have an impact, you have to be intentional. Yeah. And that's what you're really talking about, is being intentional.
Yeah. And you have to have that honest evaluation. Yeah. Like, that's one of the rules with processing emotion, is you have to commit to total emotional honesty no matter what. Because if you're not honest, there is no processing. It's all a show.
So when you're honest with your emotions, so you're trying to get that honest emotion, is there a fear, or does it happen where all of a sudden it starts triggering some of those lies and some of those things that you've believed about yourself, those identities? Because that's painful a lot of times.
Yeah. Yeah, they all play together really well. So if if in the context of family, like if my kids are doing something and in public that I don't like, my nervous system will generate disgust for that, which then anger will show up, because anger in relationships is secondary emotion. I call it a fruit emotion. So there's something else underneath it. So I can communicate in anger, and then but it's because I feel disgusted. I don't want you acting like that because it makes me look like a bad dad, which then if I act in anger towards my kids, then shame goes, you are a bad dad, which that's identity, right? Like, oh, great. So now I'm a bad dad because I got angry and I yelled at you, but really I needed to process the disgust. Like, hey, I actually don't like that behavior. Hey, and I need to have practical tools to manage that as well. But like, oh, I'm not just dealing with anger, I'm dealing with disgust. Or I'm also dealing with the fear of what other people are going to think because my kid is behaving like this in public. So now I got disgust and fear underneath the anger. Anger shows up to go, let me help you regain some control here and not look bad as a dad and not look bad to all these people. And it's like, oh, now I'm protecting me instead of helping my kid. Now I'm attacking my kid, because I'm expressing the anger, not processing not even looking at the disgust or the fear. And now shame is heaping on me, accusing me, right? And I'm like, I leave the store like, geez, I'm a horrible dad. Like, I can't believe I just freaking yelled in the store at my kid. Like, I never yelled at my kid in the store, but it happens a lot. Sure. And I see it all the time. I'm like, but that's the kind of stuff they all mingle. So they come like I don't know how to describe it, like an army. Like, here they all come at the same time. Your identity, shame, your emotions, your actions, And then you act a certain way, and those emotions
And it affects the
come,
relationships,
and it affects
right?
the relation. All of it happens, and it boom
Right.
in the blink of an eye, and you're like, "What was that?" And now I feel horrible about myself.
That's right. I just
So
shot the gun in the house.
yeah,
You know?
I shot the gun in the
the
house,
store,
in
yeah.
the store. Everyone heard it. Everyone saw it. And now I feel so horrible. And those lies are all triggered because of that one action.
And it's and so often, what does the guy do? He feels the shame. He's mad at himself. He's a bad dad. They get home, and now he medicates.
Yeah.
He either distances himself
Yeah.
from the family,
Yeah.
right? So now you got this absentee father who's, nothing wrong with watching movies or TV, but he's checking out.
Yeah.
He's drinking. That's when a guy turns to porn, whatever it is that your medication is,
Yeah.
because you just want that stuff to stop.
Yeah.
And you haven't figured out how to process it.
Yeah. Yeah. We call those short-term energy relieving behaviors. So the beer helps me feel a little bit better, but it only helps me feel a little bit better for a little while.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually process the emotions. It just
at all.
hides them for a little bit. Or the porn, or sex, or exercise can even be an unhealthy expression. So like even with the exercise stuff, we tell people like, look, if you notice that exercise is your short-term energy relieving behavior, STIRB, we call it. If you notice that that's your STIRB, right? Some guys are like emotionally locked up, shut down, totally carrying baggage, but they're ripped. Like, oh, you go to the gym to process all this, to express all this stuff with the weights. But if you notice that, it's like, okay, instead of going to the gym, which is a good thing, instead of going to the gym to avoid that or relieve that energy, write it down first. Like, I feel angry. Why do I feel angry? What's underneath there? Something's underneath there. Oh, I'm afraid. Oh, I'm disgusted. Oh, I'm sad.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm worried about something. Write that stuff down and then go work it out instead of avoid it, or go run into it instead of run from it. Yeah. So that's one thing I would say in that realm. But yeah, those are all what we would call short-term energy relieving behaviors, and people do them all the time.
As you're talking, I'm thinking about how courageous a man has to be vulnerable. When we talk about masculinity, it's really being vulnerable and being courageous to, like, say, examine your life.
Yeah.
Take honest appraisal, and then take the steps that, what am I going to do to fix this, right? Or what am I going to do to process this? So guys here listening and they're saying, okay, this is resonating. Do you have any kind of steps that you would say, hey, to start at home, start right now where you're at, to learn how to process this? What would you leave me? What would you tell me to do?
Man, to start.
Yeah.
It might depend on your relational dynamics, right? Like if you've got a pretty messed up family, you probably need to find another man or a guy or a pastor or a friend, somebody that you can talk to and be honest with, who will actually listen to you. Because a huge part of processing emotion, not expressing it, is, did somebody hear what I said? Which comes down to, because this is all this emotional stuff comes down to undelivered communications of an emotional nature. So if I have emotions that I've attempted to communicate and you've tried to fix me or give me advice or just throw a scripture at me, or any of that stuff can mean I tried to get you to hear this, but instead there was advice given or something, and now all that emotion never got delivered because I didn't feel heard. So finding someone who can hear you and listen to you and just listen and just hear you. If the family's okay, like what we do is, I call it emotional hygiene. Like every day, every night, not right now because I'm not there, but my family's probably doing it in the next half an hour. But we call it emotional hygiene. We sit down, we look at the emotions. We have a wheel. We do something real fun. My kid spins it. He picks one emotion, fear. He'll spin it. And whoever the fear aims at. Like they go first and then they just talk through their day. Like, I felt fear here. I felt worry here. I felt sad here. I felt disgust here. I felt joy here. I felt regret here. And we just talk through it, and we get to hear not just about their day, but how they experience their day.
Yeah.
And the whole time we're just going, oh, yeah. Oh, I could see how you would feel that, because we're communicating. Your communications of an emotional nature are being delivered. We're not justifying them. You know, if my son goes, Dad, I felt mad today when you didn't play soccer with me because you were working. Like, oh yeah, buddy, I could see how that would be frustrating for you and hard for you. So I'm not defending.
Right.
I had to work. I couldn't play.
Right.
I had to work. I'm not justifying. I'm not defending. None of that. I'm just allowing his emotional communications to be delivered. And we're just training our family to do this all the time.
I love that. It's what you're doing is you're normalizing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's such a key thing. I've shared this before on a different episode, but I had a friend when my wife had left and the marriage was blown up and I was going through all this grief. One of my dearest friends, he'd call me up and he says, how you doing today, David? I says, I'm so pissed off. I'm so angry. And he'd say, oh, that's good. And I'd be like, what? And then another day he'd call me and says, how you doing? I says, man, I could barely get out of bed. I'm so depressed. And he's like, that's good. You know, I'm so angry. He says, that's good. I'd be bargaining, I'd go through all these stages of grief. And so one day I sit there and I said, what are you doing? And he sits there and says, I'd be worried about you if you weren't experiencing this.
Come on.
He normalized it for me.
Yeah.
And so it took any of the self-loathing off of me or the, what's wrong with me. And once I started to normalize the emotions and the grief, man, it sped up the healing.
And you had someone just listening.
Yeah.
Man, that's good. He's not saying, here's what you do.
Right.
He's just, yeah, that's good. Good. You're feeling it.
Yeah.
Like it's coming out of you.
Yeah. I had another man, a good friend of mine, he was going through a divorce and in his field and all the friends that he had, the guys in his sphere of influence were like, because his wife left him and they were giving him all this advice, like go after her, do this. It was all about, you're being wronged and then he's talking to me and I was just kind of listening to him and let him talk. And I said, how do you think that'll affect your daughters?
Wow.
And he's like, what do you mean? And I just kind of had him thinking about his emotions. Right. Yeah. And I didn't even plan on it. It was just in conversation, but he told me later, he said that some of the things that he gleaned were so important to him because he did exactly opposite of what his emotions wanted him to do. Yeah. And then one thing I did tell him, I said, the greatest thing a man can do for his children is love their mother, even in the midst of divorce. Yeah. Right. And so he honored her. He and his daughters are doing great. And he's doing great today. But it was, again, because there was somebody, because that's what I was going to say, you got to be careful who you're talking to. Yes. Not just someone who's going to try to fix it, but you might have someone who's throwing, gas in the fire. Yeah, exactly. The other thing I was just thinking too was like, because I'm younger than you, but we grew up where men didn't talk about this at all. Right. It wasn't normalized. It wasn't even, we didn't even know what this was. And so the pendulum is way over here. Don't even talk at all. But what I've seen in society, what we've all seen, is this pendulum has swung so far the other way. People have reacted to this whole men don't talk, men don't share, even some women don't share. Like the pendulum was so far over here. Just keep your head down. Just keep going. Just keep doing your stuff. You're going to make it. And the pendulum swings so far over here that now emotions are controlling everything to the point where it's like, oh, if I want to be a dog, if I feel like a dog, I'm a dog. Yeah. And I'm like, that's the normal reaction to when we don't process. That pendulum doesn't come back and go, oh, let's learn how to process. No, it usually swings the other way first. And there's all this chaos. But we've got to get here where our emotions aren't controlling us, but we're also not just trying to shove them down and ignore them and not listen to them at all. That is so interesting because, we talk about identity and emotions being tied, and that pendulum has swung so much in society now, what's the identity is being attacked and the confusion and all those kind of things. Yeah. I never tied it at all to emotions like that. And a lot of it is reaction to pain. Yeah. That like everything I've seen is like, oh, that's a person that's hurting. Yeah.
That's a person that got shut down. That's a person that never got heard. That's a person that never got to process, oh, this is an expression of your emotional state from your whole entire upbringing that's never been processed, and now it's being expressed all over the place. And it's questioning your identity at such a deep level because they do go hand in hand.
Wow. Wow. So one thing you'd say to a guy is to get with somebody they trust.
Yeah.
And you also gave kind of that example of trying to normalize the emotion by not, by saying this is how I feel and not trying to judge it or justify it or fix it or anything else.
Yeah.
What else would you suggest?
For me, my favorite way to help me is journaling.
Okay.
I'll just tell you this story. It has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do with journaling now, but when I don't know, I just feel this story in my heart. So when I was a kid, I was never allowed to cuss, which I think is pretty good.
Yeah.
Like, my kids don't cuss. We're not cussers. Like, I don't really cuss. I'm just not a fan of it. Plus, I was a children's pastor, so I'm like, if I cuss on the stage, I'm going to have 100 kids go home and tell their parents the new word that I taught them.
That's
so
right.
I was just really careful.
That's right.
And I just never been a cusser, but my mom never let me cuss, and she'd wash my mouth out with soap and all this stuff. But it hit me so hard when I was working on some of this stuff. I think how I interpreted that I didn't interpret it as get a better vocabulary than cuss words. I didn't interpret it as any of that. I interpreted it as I'm not allowed to use the words that will properly communicate what I'm feeling. I'm not allowed to use them, so I have to find other words. So I kind of joke. I'm like, look, fudge does not process emotions when you really need to say F.
Right.
Or shucks does not get out. It doesn't, it's like, here's a little bit, relieve a little pressure. Shucks, fudge, right? Like, that's what I was allowed to say. But I realized as an adult, like, as a kid, I was feeling way more than shucks and fudge. But I was only allowed to say words that everyone else was okay with and everyone else was comfortable with. And it actually caused me to shove this down. So I think it comes directly back to honesty, being emotionally honest.
Yeah.
Like, when I started processing this stuff, I was writing all this stuff out in my journal. I was processing out my whole life story, going through my whole life, every loss, every painful moment, trying to find it and just get the emotions out. And more F words came out than I probably ever said in my whole life. And I was like, this is weird. And I hopefully the audience is okay with that. But it was me finally being honest with what I really felt. And I'm still not a cusser.
Yeah. I'm
still not going to let my kids cuss. But if they need to drop one, I'm going to go, you need to say the word that actually gets it out.
Yeah.
Don't shove it down and say what I'm okay with. You say what will actually get it out. Like, I think that's the difference between cussing and cursing. Like, I'm not saying this to curse anyone. I'm not saying this to hurt anyone. I'm only saying this to properly get out the emotion. So I think a journal really helps with that. If you don't have someone yet that you can fully be real with and trust, if you don't have if you can't do it with your family, do it on paper.
Right.
Do it on paper and be absolutely honest about what's really going on and let it out. Not to attack, not to hurt, not to cause pain. It's just for you to process, just for you to get it out. And it's amazing what can happen with that. So those would be 3 little things that could probably help some people.
So good, though.
You know, if you look in the Bible, it's like, look at David in the Psalms. The Psalms are like how to pray. And a lot of it is processing out his negative emotions so that he can get back to seeing the goodness of God and remembering who God was. He started a lot of times with the negative, not always, but he's like, here's all the stuff. you've never left me. You've always been my fortress. You've always been my stronghold. I can run back to you. Like, oh, well, he's processing out the negative so he can again get to where he can see the good in his life again.
So good. I haven't journaled much. I love to write, but I haven't journaled much. But I've been very fortunate that I've had men in my life, these last 7 years, really, in particular. I mean, guys who I can really be honest with. But when you were saying that about swearing, I don't cuss either. I mean, my dad didn't hardly at all, and I just don't do it. But one day, back when this all started to come to life inside of me, before I knew Next Third Best Third was ever going to be a thing, I was walking, and I was out in the greenbelt behind my house. There's houses on either side. It's one of those in a neighborhood greenbelt, so I mean, people can see you. They can hear you if you're talking out there. And I was just yelling at God because my life had fallen apart, and I actually cussed at God. I got it out there. I'm yelling. I says, nothing's ever going to be the same. This is not what I signed up for. This is so bad. I was just yelling at him, and I got it all out. And then all of a sudden, I felt this in my heart, a voice deep down inside me said, but it could be better.
Yeah. Wow.
And I think I didn't ever really put it together that what I was doing was, at that moment, I was just being real raw with my emotions with God.
Yeah.
I went to him.
Yeah.
And I just said, here it is. Just,
Well, you showed up with him.
Yeah.
That's it. A lot of times with God, especially, somebody else shows up. I call him our customer service rep. Our customer service rep shows up. How may I help you, Lord? Like, no, I'd like to speak to the one in charge.
Yeah.
I don't even know where that person's at. I'm here to help. And we put on this show, but there's something powerful about being totally honest with God too, where you're like, God's like, oh, now I can help you because you're actually here. Yeah. Because before you weren't even here.
Yeah, no. And those words, it could be better, really did birth inside of me hope, and I was just speaking the other day on hope, and the definition that came to me about hope was an expectation of what we're destined for.
Wow.
Isn't that good?
Yeah.
An expectation of what we're destined for. And that expectation was started to be birthed inside of me. And out of that, Next Third Best Third has come, and all the changes and all the good stuff that we're talking about, right?
Yep.
And seeing. So,
come on.
Yeah. This has been so good. I'm so glad that you're able to join me today.
Me too. So fun.
So thank you all. Seth and I are going to hang out and talk a little bit more, but we really appreciate your support. If you'd click the subscribe button, that would help. If you'd share this with other people, like, comment, it's all good to get the message out to as many guys as possible. So we'll see you next time on Next Third Best Third.